My life as a peeping Tom. I'm a voyeur. A peeping Tom if you prefer. I also have an overactive imagination. The story I'm about to tell you, however, is completely true. I haven't exaggerated it in the slightest. I didn't imagine any of it. My family, on the other hand, would like to believe that I made it all up, that I dreamt it all, that I've read one too many Anne Rice novels. It would be easier to believe, but it wouldn't be the truth. It happened when I lived on the third floor of a block of flats in the middle of Scummeyside. There was a man who lived directly opposite me in another block of flats, on the other side of the road. He had sandy brown hair and was of medium build. He wasn't someone who would stand out in a crowd. In fact, the only thing about him of interest was his eyes. They were an icy cold blue and very piercing. They seemed to see straight into your soul. He was rather dull looking, and his life seemed to fit his appearance. He sat at his desk in front of the window and worked or read or did whatever it was that he did all day. He sat at his desk from the time that I left in the morning, which was about 7:30 a.m., and he was still sitting there when I got back from work late in the afternoon. While he sat there, he held his head in his hands, ran his fingers through his tangled hair, or tapped his pen on the desk as though deep in thought. He only moved from his desk to go to the bathroom. He didn't even go out in the evening. He hardly ever looked out the window. He only seemed to have his eyes on the papers lying in front of him on his desk. They seemed to be his only interest in life. His life seemed to revolve around whatever it was that those papers lying on his desk contained. I came to the conclusion that he led a very boring life. Even so, I found him highly fascinating, and I had this urge to come up with some or other explanation as to why he lived the way he did. He lived in a bachelor flat. He had an open-plan kitchen, a small cupboard, and a single bed. I couldn't see any pictures on the wall, and the walls were painted a stark white. The main piece of furniture was his desk. There were no splashes of color to be seen anywhere in the room or on him. The only color scheme was brown and white. He had a box-like thing which he kept on his desk covered by a sheet. I had this compulsion to know what it was. Why was that one thing so important to him? I decided to spy on him. It was as simple as that. I kept my bedroom curtains closed with just a slight crack for me to see out of. I borrowed my brother's binoculars, and I had a reasonable stock of snacks piled up high next to my bed. I was all set for a few days of voyeurism. I gave my mother a call on my cell phone and told her about Mr. Strange. She, of course, said I was being silly and that he was probably just a writer or a student, and that I needed to mind my own business. I, on the other hand, thought he was just plain batty. There was just something strange about him. For one thing, if he were a writer, he would have to go out sometime to do research. Besides, to be a writer, you have to experience things to write about, unless of course he had an amazing imagination such as mine. Now, if he was a student, he had to go to lectures or at least hand in assignments, but he didn't. So what was he, and when did he buy food? That was another thing that confused me. When and what did he eat? I never saw him eat a thing. Not a single morsel. He could have been a hermit that for some reason suffered from some strange phobia. What interested me was the reason for the phobia or fear. Did something happen to him as a child? Was he locked away in a cupboard or a cellar for years and came out as a half-witted animal? Is that one of the reasons why he locked himself in his flat from dawn till dusk? Is he afraid of people? He could also have been a vampire who stalked the streets at night. Maybe that was why there didn't seem to be any mirrors on the walls. The one in the bathroom that I could see from my window was broken. He could also have been a serial killer who preyed on innocent victims after midnight, when I was already fast asleep in bed, unaware of what was going on in the world around me. Another Hannibal Lecter, and where was Jodie Foster when you needed her? My mother thought that he was completely harmless. He probably couldn't afford to buy any pictures or replace the broken mirror. I discarded my mother's belief for the plain and simple reason that it was simply too boring an explanation. She just had no imagination. I preferred something a little more intricate, one that was slightly gorier, more fantastic, and definitely a lot more interesting. What could he be besides a vampire or a serial killer? The thing on his desk could have been a computer that he just kept covered. But I'd never actually seen him work on it, or even uncover it. It could also have been a severed head that he kept as a memento from one of his more memorable victims. I munched on some chips, put the binoculars to my eyes, and watched him through the crack in my curtains. The moon was high in the sky. Streetlights reflected on the tar of the road below. Tires screeched and I heard the sound of metal on metal. Footsteps pounded on concrete as someone ran, running away from the scene of a crime. I watched Mr. Strange and carried on munching away on my snack collection. He hadn't moved in hours. My back was killing me. I needed to stretch, but I couldn't tear myself away from my vigil. I shifted my position. My numb bum regained some feeling in the left cheek. My brother's binoculars were firmly fitted to my eye sockets. I was not going to move until the mystery of Mr. Strange was solved. Nancy drew move aside. His head jerked up. He looked out the window and smiled. He smiled at me. I tried to convince myself that there was no way that he could see me. My bedroom lights were off. There was no way he could see my reflection through the curtains. He was not smiling at me. He was only smiling in my direction. His lights went off. There was a knock at my door. Strange. I turned away from the window and put the binoculars on my bed. I made my way to the front door. My hand was on the doorknob. My lights went out. I heard someone breathing heavily right next to my ear. I felt something wet on my neck. It was pitch black in my tiny flat. I couldn't see anything. The wetness on my neck was someone's tongue. My heart started to pound. I wanted to run. I needed to escape. This wasn't what I had in mind. I felt a sharp pain in my neck as he bit me. I felt weak as my blood left my body through the punctures in my neck. My heart beat slower and slower. Tingles swept through my body. I wasn't ready to go into the light just yet. I had too many things to see and do. I was falling through the earth. Just falling. Nothing was going to stop my fall. Nothing was going to catch me. Your mystery is now solved. I heard a voice whisper and the door closed. My heart beat a slow dance in my chest. Yes, my mystery was solved. I opened my eyes, rolled onto my stomach. I pulled myself back towards my bedroom. Back to my window. Back to the binoculars. Another mystery waited.